Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, we start off our broadcast today with the U.S. President giving the green light for more troops in the Middle East and asking Congress for the $5.6 billion to help pay for it. President Obama gave the go-ahead this week for 1,500 more troops to be sent to Iraq. The new arrivals will be focused on dealing with the group known as, you guessed it, ISIS. Oh. Now, with this latest increase in troops, the number has grown from 275 in June to currently 3,100.
Sounds like they're getting closer to that whole boots on the ground thing. The American troops will be spread out to half dozen locations across the country. Until now, U.S. troops have been confined to Baghdad and the city of Erbil in the north. 630 will be sent as advisors to the headquarters of Iraqi units fighting ISIS north and west of Baghdad, including in Anbar province, where some of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War took place.
830 of the additional troops will be trainers stationed at Iraqi military bases throughout the country to train a total of 12 Iraqi and Kurdish brigades, which roughly contain 54,000 soldiers. Now, the White House insists none of the American troops will engage in combat. Now, this is the next phase in the battle against ISIS. It will take 2 to 3 months for all the American troops to arrive in Iraq and another 6 months to train the Iraqi units.
Wow. Now, this new strategy against ISIS isn't coming without a cost. The president is asking Congress for $5.6 billion for the operations in Iraq and Syria. The president and the White House deny there's any mission at this time, but have admitted it may need even more troops than these to fulfill the goals against ISIS in Iraq.
Well, now General Lloyd Austin, who heads Central Command, briefed all the congressional leaders along with President Obama about the progress against ISIS in Iraq. Congressional leaders signaled that they will approve this request for more troops and more money, but congressional Republican leaders made it clear to the White House that when they become the majority party, they want better benchmarks and goals to determine if the strategy against ISIS is even working.
Right. Now, the U.S. Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Bob McDonald, plans to punish, if not fire, more than 1,000 people after the biggest scandal in VA history, which we brought not too long ago, all the things that were taking place and the amount of people that were waiting. The former CEO of Procter & Gamble took over the VA in July after it was discovered that managers had kept phony waiting lists that showed vets getting medical appointments in 14 days, when in reality they had been kept waiting more than a year.
Wow.
Big difference.
Quite a difference there.
Yeah, sure is.
Well, in a CBS News interview, Mr. McDonald said that these people violated our values. Now, what were those values? Mr. McDonald said it's integrity, it's advocacy, it's respect, it's excellence. These are the things that we try to do for our veterans.
That's right. This type of restructuring isn't going to be easy. To fire a government manager, one has to put together a case, prove it to an administrative judge. Once the judge rules, the individual has time to appeal that ruling. Until that time, many of those whose actions are in question are being put on administrative leave.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear a second challenge to Obamacare. The issue this time is whether the government may help people pay for their premiums in states that did not set up health insurance exchanges. Now, only 16 states have them. In 2012, the court upheld the main Obamacare provision, the one that requires almost all Americans to buy health insurance.
Well, from the tumultuousness of political affairs to high turbulence in the environment, YPN's Larry McGee has our multi-part story on the trouble brewing in the air and the affairs of men. Larry, what do you have for us?
Chicago, otherwise known as the Windy City, lived up to its nickname this week as unnatural weather conditions produced winds so strong that a jet was forced to land sideways. Take a look at this video. The pilot and passengers are reported to be safe, but chaotic weather conditions are nonetheless still threatening to produce disasters in other places. A typhoon in the Pacific is scheduled to crash into Alaska with enough force to change the jet stream. The polar vortex will then push cold Arctic air over much of the United States. In explaining the phenomenon, meteorologists say there will be wind gusts approaching 100 miles per hour in Alaska, and what that will do is send a jolt of energy to the jet stream, causing it to buckle and create a ridge over the west coast with warm and dry air, and then a tremendous area of cold air will come down from the Arctic with the high pressure that would originally be seen in February. By the week's end, every state from the continental divide to the Atlantic Ocean is expected to be affected. The coldness is not just in the air, however, as officials in Detroit, under conditions imposed by its bankruptcy reorganization, are slated to cut the pensions of its retirees by 4.5%. In Missouri, many are bracing themselves for harsh conditions, just as many people are bracing themselves for the cold. The citizens of Ferguson, Missouri, are awaiting a grand jury's decision concerning whether to indict Darren Wilson, the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. A decision is expected soon, and in the meantime, men like Captain Ron Johnson are working to keep the peace. The destruction around Ferguson, Johnson says, symbolizes the community and how fragile and crumbled things are in the Missourian city. The captain, who was brought in to try and restore order after days of nightly clashes and believes effective communication has been the missing element in the conflict, has been meeting with students, former gang members, and ministers who are concerned about what may occur if the officer fails to be indicted. If that turns out to be the case, some say they are getting prepared for war. But the captain maintains that the aftermath of the grand jury's decision is not going to be as bad as some are making it out to be, but acknowledges there are still cold days ahead for Ferguson. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
We appreciate your report, Larry. Well, it'll be interesting, Katan, to see what the verdict is from the Ferguson outcome there, or the Ferguson trial, and what takes place in the city.
Right.
Well, back over to the Middle East, as the emotion of anger is on the rise in Pakistan over Israeli attacks of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, one man said, an attack on Al-Aqsa is an attack on Islam. We condemn these actions in the strongest possible terms. Another man went on to say, all Muslim countries should get united and take action against Israel for this brutal act. They should also boycott all those countries that are supporting Israel.
Wow. Pakistani government leaders have denounced Israeli actions and is urging the international community to stop Tel Aviv from violating the rights of the Palestinians. A spokeswoman for the Pakistan Foreign Ministry said in addressing the issue, we condemn this violence against peaceful people who were praying there, and we condemn the desecration of the holy place.
The Pakistani Prime Minister has also issued a statement describing the desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque as an act of terror, as well as condemning Tel Aviv for ignoring international law by violating the rights of the Palestinians. The Al-Aqsa Mosque has lately been the scene of the Palestinian worshippers and Israeli settlers and troops in the past few weeks. Now, the Palestinians are concerned over the changing of the demographic makeup of Jerusalem by constructing illegal settlements and destroying historical sites and also expelling some of the local population.
Sure. And there's been a lot of tit for tat going on in that area too, so we're not going to find any peace anytime soon. Well, people are also wanting Al-Quds to be the capital of future independence, of the Palestinian state, and that its Islamic heritage remain intact. Well, of course, as we speak, those tensions continue to mount in the occupied territory as Israeli forces clash violently with Palestinians over the closure of Islam's third holiest site. Scores have been injured, hundreds have been arrested, and heightened clashes have been occurring at checkpoints as protesters resist the Israeli troops.
Well, voters have just elected several public officials who have a kind of shady background. Now, one such individual is a Republican doctor who had sexual relations with several of his patients and actually got one of them pregnant. And then on top of that, he demanded that she get an abortion.
Oh, amazing.
Supposedly a pro-life doctor as well. Well, another is a federally indicted congressman who threatened to throw a reporter over a balcony. And finally, an ex-con who served 4 terms as Louisiana's governor.
Well, Congressman Scott DesJarlais, as we said, slept with multiple patients, but he apologized. New York Congressman Michael Grimm, an ex-Marine, sealed his victory, quoting Rocky. He's definitely a fighter, as he threatened to throw that reporter that we spoke about, who dared ask him about his past, telling him, if you ever do that again, I'll throw you off this effing balcony. I'll break you in half like a little boy. Now, that's words from a real bold man right there. And Louisiana's Governor Edwin Edwards served 9 years for extortion and campaigned on the slogan, "Vote for the crook." It's important.
For the crook.
Yeah, that's right. Well, despite all of that, he was still in the lead heading toward December's runoff. So,
Well, lastly, a Californian congressional candidate, Carl DeMaio, was blasted for sexual misconduct before he was cleared. He's still in the running.
Well, in recent news, Pope Francis visited the Vatican grotto, which lies underneath St. Peter's Basilica, to pray for the souls of dead pontiffs. He did this traditionally, as they normally do, on the 2nd of November, the day of which the Church commemorates the solemnity of all the dead. He prayed in front of the tombs and offered prayers to Benedict XV, Pius XI, Pius XII, Blessed Paul VI, John Paul I, and John Paul II. And Jeff, as of yet, as far as we know, there have not been any responses to those prayers from these dead popes to Pope Benedict. Yeah.
Well, also in the morning mass at Casa Santa Marta, the Pope said that there are 2 paths that exist. One that is attached to the letter of the law. The other is of those who love justice and fulfill the law of love. He continued, this path that Jesus teaches us, complete opposite of the doctors of the law. And this path of the love of justice brings us to God. Instead, the other path of being attached to the law brings you closer to yourself, to selfishness, he said. Now, the Pope went on to say that one must not forget justice and love, because following the letter of the law is no guarantee that good is done.
Well, now that sounds a little bit confusing to me, but based on what he said. Well, he finished up by babbling, this path of living attached to the law would bring them far from love and justice. They followed the law, but neglected justice. They followed the law, but neglected love. And Jesus had a word for these people, he said, hypocrites. Well, Pope Francis warned that those who followed this path of living by the letter of the law closed the door to hope and to love, to salvation, while the path of love and justice that he's speaking of brings one closer to meeting with Christ. Of course, if that's the kind of thing that you're into, meeting Christ, it won't get you anywhere scripturally speaking as far as we know, but that's what he said. Well, with statements like these, it's no wonder the world is in total and utter confusion and chaos. Peace, love, joy, justice, they cannot be attained in man's life without the law and following it strictly by the letter. Well, there is only one man who is authorized on the face of this earth to lead mankind down the one and only path to salvation. His name is Yisrayl Hawkins. If you're tired of groping in the dark and you're ready to start anew, contact the House of Yahweh.
Contact the House of Yahweh and request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. Now, you can also email them at info@yahweh.com, and for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, be prepared to walk down the path of the straight and narrow, as Yisrayl Hawkins is up next. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for joining us.